Take your hands off the bike and step where I can see you." The words cut through the rain before Naomi Brooks had even turned off the engine. Her black sport bike stood beneath the harsh white lights of Pump 7, ticking softly as heat rose from the frame into the midnight air. The gas station sat just off Interstate 94, 10 miles outside Chicago, one of those lonely places where the coffee tasted burned, the pavement smelled like oil, and every sound carried too far. Naomi lifted her visor slowly. She could see the reflection of blue lights trembling across the wet chrome, across the glass doors, across the small puddles spreading near her boots. Officer Travis Keller stood behind his patrol car with one hand resting near his belt, his face half-shadowed under the brim of his cap. He was not looking at her like a citizen. He was looking at her like a problem he had already solved. Naomi kept both hands visible and moved with the careful patience of someone who understood exactly how quickly a misunderstanding could be written into a report. "Officer," she said, her voice low and steady, "I'm going to reach for my license." Keller's mouth bent into something that was not quite a smile. "Not yet. First, tell me whose bike this is." The question hung there under the fluorescent buzz. A white man in a pickup paused by the air pump. A cashier watched from behind the glass. Somewhere near the ice machine, a young woman raised her phone but did not point it openly. Naomi could feel the old familiar pressure settle over the moment, heavy as humidity before a storm. She had worn a robe in federal courtrooms, signed warrants that made powerful men sweat, listened to lawyers argue over liberty, evidence, and rights. But out here, in a leather jacket with rain on her shoulders and a helmet tucked against her ribs, Keller did not see any of that. He saw a black woman alone on a sport bike that looked too expensive for the story he had already placed on her. "It belongs to me," Naomi said. "Registration is in the storage compartment." Keller took one step closer. "Nice bike," he said. "Shame it probably isn't yours." The words were quiet, almost casual, and that made them colder. Naomi felt them land, but she did not give him the anger he was waiting for. She had learned from her father in a one-car garage in Detroit that a hot engine could burn you twice if you touched it wrong. So she breathed once, let the rain slide down the side of her helmet, and said, "You need to call your supervisor." Keller laughed under his breath. "You people always want a supervisor." Behind him, another patrol car rolled in slow, tires hissing over wet asphalt. Naomi noticed the time on the pump display, 12:17 a.m. She noticed the camera above the store entrance, angled toward Pump 7. She noticed Keller's badge number, the smudge on his body camera, the way his radio volume was turned low. Details mattered. Details survived when people lied. "Step away from the bike," Keller ordered. Naomi did. One foot, then the other, her boots pressing into the slick concrete. The motorcycle's headlights still glowed behind her, a single white eye in the rain. "I have identification," she said. "I have court credentials. Everything you need is in my wallet." "I didn't ask for your resume," Keller said. He reached toward the small compartment near the seat before she could warn him not to force it. The latch clicked open, and her wallet slid halfway out, dark leather damp at the edges. A gold-edged federal court credential flashed for less than a second beneath her license, but Keller barely looked. He flipped past it as if it were a receipt. Then he placed her wallet on the bike seat and turned back to her. "Hands behind your back." The cashier inside stopped moving. The young woman's phone rose higher. Naomi's heartbeat did not speed up. It narrowed, like a courtroom going silent before a verdict. "Officer Keller," she said, using his name for the first time, "you are making a mistake." His eyes sharpened. "People like you always say that." The cuffs closed around her wrists with a clean metallic click. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. Naomi looked down at the wet pavement, then at the cracked reflection of the blue lights moving across it. She did not fight. She did not shout. She simply turned her head toward the camera above the door and let it see her face. The second patrol car stopped at an angle behind Naomi's bike, blocking the narrow lane between Pump 7 and the exit. Its headlights washed over her boots, the wet concrete, the small ribbon of steam still lifting from the engine. Officer Brian Cole stepped out slowly, chewing gum, his uniform jacket half zipped against the rain. He looked at Naomi first, then at the motorcycle, then at Keller with the lazy confidence of a man entering a scene already decided. "What do we have?" Cole asked. Keller did not answer right away. He tightened his grip on Naomi's wallet, flipped it open again, and finally pulled out her driver's license with 2 fingers. Out-of-state plates, expensive bike. No clear explanation. Naomi turned her head just enough to meet Cole's eyes. "The registration is valid. My insurance card is behind the license. My court identification is in the same wallet." Cole gave a short laugh. "Court identification?" Keller looked down for half a second, then snapped the wallet shut before Cole could see inside. "People print all kinds of things now." The words slid into the rain, thin and poisonous. Naomi felt the cuffs pressing against her wrists, not sharply, but constantly, a reminder that her hands had been taken from her before her name had been understood. She watched Keller place her wallet on the hood of his patrol car, instead of returning it to the evidence pouch. That mattered. She watched Cole glance toward the store window, where the cashier had frozen beside a rack of phone chargers. That mattered too. Every small choice left a footprint. "Officer Keller," Naomi said, calm enough that both men looked at her, "you are required to articulate reasonable suspicion for this detention." Keller's face hardened. "You've been watching too many videos?" "No," Naomi said. "I've been reading the law." Cole's smile thinned. For a moment, all anyone heard was rain tapping the metal canopy and the soft electric hum above the pumps. Then Keller stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was offering advice instead of a warning. "Listen carefully. The easiest way for this to go is you stop talking, get in the car, and let us sort it out." Naomi looked past him through the glass to the woman with the phone. The woman was young, maybe 25, wearing a green gas station hoodie with a name tag that read Lena. Her hand shook, but the phone stayed up. Naomi gave her the smallest nod. Not enough for Keller to notice, but enough for Lena to understand that what she was doing mattered. "I will cooperate with any lawful instruction," Naomi said. "I will not help you invent a story." The sentence changed the air. Keller stared at her as if she had crossed a line only he was allowed to draw. Cole shifted his weight and reached for the radio clipped near his shoulder. "Want to call in?" he asked. Keller took one more look at Naomi, then at the motorcycle, then at the wallet on his hood. "No, we're taking her in." "On what charge?" Naomi asked. Keller smiled this time, small and satisfied. "We will figure that out downtown." That was the moment Naomi understood this was not confusion. It was routine, a pattern rehearsed, so often it no longer needed reasons. She thought of the sealed files waiting on her desk, the reports of traffic stops that ended with missing cash, impounded vehicles, and signed complaint forms, body camera gaps exactly where truth should have been. Men and women with ordinary jobs, ordinary fear, ordinary lives interrupted on roads, just like this one. They had written statements no one believed. They had called supervisors who never called back. They had watched their property disappear in a paperwork. Naomi had read their names until late nights blurred into early mornings, but the pages had still felt distant, legal, contained. Now the rain was on her skin. The cuffs were on her wrists. The pattern had found her. Keller opened the back door of the patrol car. The inside smelled faintly of plastic, old coffee, and wet fabric. Before Naomi stepped in, she turned once toward her bike. The black and blue frame gleamed under the canopy lights, elegant and still, the last thing her father had left her that could move faster than grief. He had taught her to check mirrors, check pressure, check the sky, and never mistake calm for surrender. "Careful with the helmet," she said. Keller picked it up from his seat and held it by the strap. "You worried about your toys now?" "I am worried about evidence," Naomi replied. Cole's gums stopped moving. Keller tossed the helmet into the front passenger seat of his cruiser, not hard, but careless enough for the visor to tap against the console. A thin crack appeared near the edge of the face shield, catching the blue light like a small lightning bolt. Naomi saw it. Lena saw it. The camera above the door saw it too. Then Naomi lowered herself into the back seat without another word. As Keller shut the door, the sound sealed her inside with the rain-muted world, but her eyes stayed on the gas station glass, where Lena Ortiz stood perfectly still, phone in hand, recording the beginning of something far bigger than a midnight traffic stop. The ride to the station took 8 minutes, but inside the back seat it felt longer. Rain slid down the cruiser window in crooked silver lines, bending the gas station lights until they looked like something underwater. Naomi Brooks sat upright with her shoulders relaxed, her wrists resting carefully behind her, her breath slow enough to count. Keller drove with one hand on the wheel and the other near the radio, saying almost nothing. Cole followed behind in the second patrol car with Naomi's sport bike left locked beneath the gas station canopy, bright and alone under the cameras. That choice mattered. They had not called a tow truck yet. They had not inventoried the motorcycle. They had not photographed the scene. They were moving fast because fast mistakes were easier to bury before morning. Naomi looked at the digital clock glowing on the dashboard. 12:29 a.m. She repeated it silently. Time was the spine of every case. Without time, memory became fog. With time, lies had corners. Keller glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Quiet now. Naomi met his eyes through the glass. Listening. He gave a dry laugh. That is new. No, she said. It is how records begin. His jaw shifted, but he turned back to the road. Outside, the suburbs passed in strips of darkness and sodium light. Closed diners, empty bus stops, wet flags hanging limp outside office parks. Naomi knew this part of Illinois by its legal geography more than its streets. The district lines, the federal courthouse downtown, the county holding facilities, the police departments that sent quarterly reports with numbers too neat to be trusted. 3 weeks earlier, a name had landed on her desk for the 4th time. Marcus Reed. 27 years old, delivery driver, Army veteran, black, stopped at night while driving home from a warehouse shift. His car had been impounded after a so-called paperwork issue. His cash envelope, $860 meant for rent, disappeared from the property log. The complaint he filed was marked incomplete. The body camera footage showed only the last 40 seconds, just enough to make him look angry, not enough to explain why. Naomi had read his file twice. Then she had read 17 more that sounded the same. Different names. Same county corridor. Same officers. Same missing minutes. Same quiet damage. Keller did not know that. He did not know the woman in his back seat had authorized a sealed review of asset seizures only 48 hours earlier. He did not know federal investigators were already circling the edges of the department, waiting for one clean thread to pull. And Naomi, feeling the cool bite of the cuffs against her skin, understood with a strange stillness that Keller had just handed her the thread. The station appeared beyond a row of bare trees, squat and beige under floodlights, with an American flag snapping wetly above the entrance. Keller pulled into a side lot instead of the public intake lane. Naomi noticed that too. A gray metal door opened before he even parked. Captain Richard Hale stood beneath the awning in a dark raincoat, silver hair combed back, expression flat as stone. He had not been called by dispatch, not in any normal way. He was already waiting. Keller stepped out and spoke to him in a low voice. Naomi could not hear every word through the glass, but she caught enough. Sport bike, Keller said. Clean wallet. Maybe connected. Hale looked toward the back seat, and for the first time that night, Naomi saw caution flicker across a man's face. Not guilt. Not yet. Recognition of risk. Keller opened the door. Out. Naomi stepped onto the wet pavement carefully. Hale studied her leather jacket, her boots, her calm face, then looked at Keller. Did you search the bike? Not fully. Did you run her through federal? Keller hesitated. That silence was louder than an answer. Hale's mouth tightened. Inside. Now. The hallway smelled of floor polish and old paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making every surface look pale and tired. A young desk officer looked up as they entered, then quickly looked down when Hale gave him a glance. No one asked Naomi if she needed water. No one asked if the cuffs were too tight. No one asked why she had been brought through a side entrance after a traffic stop with no listed charge. Naomi kept walking because she wanted to see where they would place her, what they would write, who would speak, who would avoid looking at her. At the booking counter, Keller set her wallet down beside a stack of forms. The gold-edged court credential slid partly free again, catching the overhead light. Hale saw it this time. His eyes dropped to it, held for 1 second, then rose slowly to Naomi's face. She said nothing. Hale reached out and pushed the credential back under the license with one finger. "Put her in interview 2, he said quietly. Naomi understood then. He had seen enough to know the truth might be dangerous, but not enough courage to stop the lie. Interview 2 was a narrow room with beige walls, a metal table, and a camera mounted high in the corner behind a smoked plastic dome. Naomi noticed it before she noticed the chair. She noticed the second camera too, smaller, tucked above the door frame where most people would never look. Someone had installed it after an old lawsuit, she guessed, the kind departments settled quietly and then pretended to learn from. Keller guided her inside without touching her again, and Cole lingered in the hallway, pretending to study his phone while listening to every word. Captain Hale entered last and closed the door with 2 fingers, softly, as if quiet manners could make the room less wrong. Naomi sat when told, keeping her back straight despite the cuffs. Hale placed her wallet, license, and folded registration papers on the table, but not the court credential. That was missing now. He had removed it somewhere between the counter and the room. Naomi looked at the empty space where it should have been and said nothing. Silence made careless men nervous. Hale cleared his throat. "Miss Brooks, we're trying to resolve this without making it worse for you." Naomi lifted her eyes. "Judge Brooks." The room went still. Keller gave a short laugh from beside the wall. "Here we go." Hale did not laugh. He looked at Naomi the way a man looks at a locked door after realizing he may not have the key. "You are claiming to be a judge?" "I'm identifying myself correctly," Naomi said. "My federal credential was in that wallet when Officer Keller opened it at the gas station. It was visible again at your booking counter. It is no longer on this table." Keller's smile faded by a fraction. Hale folded his hands. "Credentials get verified. Attitudes do not help." "Neither does obstruction," Naomi replied. The word landed cleanly, with no raised voice behind it. Hale's eyes sharpened. Rain tapped faintly against a covered window somewhere beyond the wall. The clock above the door read 12:46 a.m. Naomi stored the time. Hale slid a printed form from a folder and placed it in front of her. "This is a preliminary statement. It says you were stopped during a routine vehicle check, became verbally combative, refused lawful instructions, and agreed to come here for verification." Naomi looked down. The paper smelled warm, fresh from the printer. The language was polished, too polished for something supposedly written in the last few minutes. She read the first line, then the second, then the third. Every sentence was built like a small trap. No hard accusation, no clean charge, just enough fog to make the officers look reasonable and her look difficult. "You want me to sign a lie," she said. Keller shifted. "It says you agreed to come in. I was handcuffed. For safety." Naomi looked at him. "Whose?" Cole made a soft sound in the hallway, then went quiet. Hale pushed a pen across the table. It rolled once and stopped near Naomi's cuffed hands. "Sign it, and you walk out. Your bike gets released in the morning. Nobody loses sleep. Nobody has to make this a federal matter." For the first time that night, Naomi almost smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because he had just revealed the room he thought they were standing in. He believed this was a negotiation. He believed she wanted convenience more than truth. He believed most people signed because freedom at any price felt better than waiting in a locked room. Naomi thought of Marcus Reed and the missing $860. She thought of a mother from Gary who had lost her minivan after a traffic stop and spent 3 months taking 2 buses to work. She thought of the handwritten complaints stamped incomplete, the body camera gaps, the property logs where signatures appeared in the wrong ink. Then she looked at Hale and asked softly, "How many people said yes because they were scared?" Hale did not answer. Keller stepped forward. "You need to watch yourself." Naomi turned her gaze to the camera dome. "No," she said. "You do." Hale reached up and pressed a button on the wall beside the door. A small red light beneath the main camera went dark. The room seemed to inhale. Naomi's eyes moved to the smaller camera above the frame, its lens still catching a pinprick of reflected light. Hale had forgotten it or never known it existed. That mattered. He sat across from her, lowered his voice, and said, "Miss Brooks, let me be clear. Around here, paperwork decides what happened." Naomi leaned forward just enough for the hidden camera to see her face. "Then you should have read mine." The missing credential changed the shape of the room. Naomi saw it in Hale's shoulders, in Keller's restless hands, in the way Cole stopped pretending not to listen from the hallway. They were no longer dealing with a woman they thought they could rush through a form and release before sunrise. They were dealing with a fact they had tried to slide out of sight, and facts had a way of returning with witnesses. Hale picked up the pen and placed it closer to Naomi, careful not to touch her. "You can correct the title later," he said. "Right now, this is about cooperation." Naomi looked at the statement again. Her wrists ached from the awkward angle behind her back, but her voice stayed even. "Cooperation is not consent to fiction." Keller exhaled sharply. "You talk like every sentence belongs in court." Naomi turned toward him. "Some of them will." The words did not need volume. They crossed the room quietly and settled there. Hale's face tightened. He stood, walked to the corner, and lowered his voice toward Keller. They spoke in fragments, the kind meant to be heard by everyone and understood by no one. "Call the lot." "Not yet." "The bike." "Too visible." "The phone." She never gave consent. Naomi listened without appearing to listen. She had done it for years from the bench, hearing what people meant beneath what they dared to say. Outside the room, fluorescent light spilled through the narrow window in the door. Somewhere down the hall, a printer hummed, then stopped. The station had the false quiet of a place that had learned how to hide panic inside routine. Hale returned to the table with a different expression, softer around the mouth, colder in the eyes. "Miss Brooks, I understand you may feel disrespected." Naomi lifted her gaze. "This is not about my feelings." "Then let us keep it simple. A misunderstanding happened. We document it cleanly. You go home. We release the bike. Everyone moves on." "Who is everyone?" she asked. Hale blinked once. "Excuse me." "Everyone moves on," Naomi repeated. "Does that include Marcus Reed?" Keller's head turned too quickly. Cole looked up from the hallway. Hale did not move at all, which told Naomi more than a denial would have. The name had landed. Marcus was not just a file to them. He was a memory they wished stayed buried. Naomi continued, still calm. "Does it include Denise Walker from Gary, whose minivan was held for 91 days? Does it include Jerome Ellis, whose complaint was closed before anyone interviewed him? Does it include the 23 asset seizure log signed after midnight by the same two officers?" Keller's face drained of its easy arrogance. Hale leaned slowly over the table. "Where did you get those names?" Naomi looked toward the small camera above the doorframe. "From paperwork." For several seconds, nobody spoke. The rain outside softened to a steady whisper against the building. Hale straightened and adjusted his cuff, buying time with a gesture that belonged in boardrooms, not interview rooms. "You are making accusations you do not understand." "No," Naomi said. "I am recognizing a pattern." Keller stepped toward the table, not threatening, but unsettled enough to forget caution. "You think you know this place because you read a few complaints?" Naomi finally looked directly at him. "I know this place because people told the truth, and men like you counted on nobody reading it." Cole shifted in the doorway. His gum was gone now. His face had lost its lazy confidence. Hale saw it too, and snapped, "Close the door." Cole obeyed, but before it shut, Naomi caught a glimpse of the desk officer across the hall, staring at her wallet through the glass partition. The credential was not hidden anymore. It was in Hale's folder, and the young officer had seen enough gold at the edge to wonder. Hale sat again. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Sign the statement." Naomi lowered her eyes to the paper. The first sentence blurred under the cheap overhead light, not because she was afraid, but because the room was suddenly full of all the people who had sat where she sat and believed there was no clean way out. She imagined Marcus Reed at a kitchen table with an eviction notice, Denise Walker standing in a bus shelter before dawn, Jerome Ellis calling a number that never returned his message. Then she pushed the paper back across the table until it touched Hale's folded hands. No. Keller laughed once, but it cracked in the middle. Hale's jaw set. Then we will process you. For what charge? Naomi asked. Hale looked at her for a long second. Interference. With what? She asked. The silence answered first. Then, from somewhere beyond the closed door, a phone began ringing. Not the desk phone, not the station line. Hale's personal cell vibrated inside his coat pocket, buzzing against the table as if the room itself had developed a pulse. He ignored it. It rang again. Keller looked at him. Cole looked through the narrow glass. Hale finally pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and the color left his face so subtly that only Naomi, trained to read verdicts before they were spoken, caught it. He stepped back and answered in a low voice. Captain Hale. The voice on the other end was faint but sharp enough for Naomi to hear one phrase through the quiet. Why is Judge Naomi Brooks in your building? Hale did not speak. Naomi sat very still, cuffs cold against her wrists, rain drying on her jacket, while the first crack opened in the wall they had built around themselves. Hale held the phone to his ear, but for 3 full seconds he did not breathe into it. The name on the screen had done what Naomi's calm voice could not. It had reached past his confidence and touched the part of him that knew paperwork could become evidence. Keller stood near the wall, watching his captain's face change in tiny pieces. Cole remained behind the door glass, no longer pretending this was ordinary. Naomi sat at the table with her hands still secured, her jacket drying in uneven patches, the smell of rain and floor polish mixing in the small room. Hale finally turned away from her, lowering his voice. There has been a misunderstanding. The voice on the phone cut through faintly, crisp, and controlled. Then misunderstand it correctly. Federal personnel are on the way. Hale's eyes flicked to Keller. We were verifying identification. You removed it from her wallet, the voice said. That stopped him. Naomi watched his shoulders stiffen. Somewhere in this building, someone had already spoken. Maybe the young desk officer who saw the credential. Maybe dispatch. Maybe Lena Ortiz, standing under gas station lights with a phone full of truth. Lies moved fast in places like this, but fear moved faster once the right name entered the room. Hale ended the call without saying goodbye. He set the phone face down on the table, careful and slow. Take the cuffs off, he said. Keller blinked. Captain. Hale did not look at him. Now. Keller hesitated just long enough to make the command look reluctant. Then he stepped behind Naomi and unlocked the cuffs. The metal opened with a small click, softer than when it closed, but Naomi felt the difference travel through her whole body. She brought her hands forward slowly. Pale marks circled both wrists, not deep, not dramatic, but clear beneath the fluorescent light. She rubbed neither one. She placed her hands flat on the table where the hidden camera could see them. Hale saw that too. Judge Brooks, he said, the title now heavy in his mouth. We can release you immediately. Naomi looked at the unsigned statement still lying between them. You tried to manufacture a record. That is not what happened. Then preserve every camera angle, every dispatch log, every entry record, every property sheet, every message sent after 12:17 a.m. Keller's expression tightened at the time. She had kept it. Of course she had. Hale folded the false statement and tucked it back into the folder. You are not in your courtroom. Naomi's eyes lifted to his. No, I am in yours. That is the problem. The words settled without echo. A room like that was built for pressure. The low ceiling, the fixed chair, the buzzing light, the door with no handle on the inside for the person being questioned. It was meant to make people feel smaller. But Naomi had spent her life learning that dignity did not require space. It only required a spine. Hale stepped toward the door. Move her to holding until Federal arrives. Keller looked relieved, as if a different room could shrink the truth. Naomi stood. Her legs were steady, but the quiet around her had changed. Nobody joked now. Nobody asked if the bike was stolen. Nobody said people like you. They walked her down the hall, past the booking counter, where the young desk officer kept his eyes on the paperwork and his mouth closed tight. Naomi's federal credential now lay on top of Hale's folder, not hidden anymore, its gold edge bright beneath the lights. She read the officer's nameplate as she passed. Evan Miles. He looked up for 1 second, and in that second, Naomi saw a man deciding whether silence would protect him or bury him. The holding room was small, with a bench bolted to the wall and a narrow window high enough to show only the rain shining against the parking lot lights. Keller closed the door, but did not lock it with the same confidence he had before. Naomi sat alone. The room hummed. Her wrists cooled. Water darkened the hem of her jeans. On the other side of the wall, voices rose and dropped. Phones rang. Drawers opened. Footsteps moved faster than before. Panic had a rhythm. She knew it from courtrooms when sealed evidence appeared, from executives when subpoenas arrived, from officers when body cameras contradicted reports. Naomi looked toward the property shelf visible through the small interior window. Her cracked helmet sat in a clear plastic bin beside her gloves. The fracture in the visor caught the light like a thin white scar. For a moment, she was back in Detroit, 12 years old, standing beside her father in a garage that smelled of motor oil and winter dust. He had handed her a wrench and said, "A machine tells the truth if you listen long enough." She had believed him then. She believed him now. This building was a machine. Every hallway, logbook, camera, and careless sentence had been turning for years. Tonight, for the first time, it was making a sound loud enough for someone to hear. Outside the holding room, Hale's voice cut through the wall, strained but controlled. "Find Keller's body camera file." Another voice answered, nervous. "Captain, there is a gap." Naomi closed her eyes, not in relief, not yet. A gap was never empty. A gap was where the truth had been removed, and removal always left fingerprints. The words, "there is a gap," reached Naomi through the wall with the quiet force of a confession. She opened her eyes and looked at the cracked visor in the evidence bin. A missing minute was never just a missing minute. It had a beginning, an ending, and a hand that decided what the public would not be allowed to see. Outside the holding room, the station had lost its rhythm. Phones rang too often. Chairs scraped. Someone moved quickly down the hall, then stopped as another voice said, "Federal vehicles just pulled in." Naomi stood before the door opened. The first person she saw was not Hale or Keller. It was Agent Daniel Pierce, tall, gray-haired, wearing a dark overcoat with rain beating on the shoulders. Behind him came two federal agents carrying sealed evidence bags and the kind of calm that made guilty rooms feel smaller. Pierce looked through the narrow window first, and when his eyes met Naomi's, something in his face softened. "Judge Brooks," he said as the door opened. "Are you injured?" "No," Naomi answered. "But your case just found its missing link." Pierce nodded once, as if he had expected no less from her. In the hallway, Hale stepped forward with a polished expression that had probably survived school boards, press conferences, and disciplinary hearings. "Agent Pierce, we were in the process of verifying her identity." Pierce did not look at him right away. He opened a leather folder and removed a court order protected by a clear plastic sleeve. The blue federal seal caught the fluorescent light. "Captain Richard Hale," he said, "this is a preservation order covering body camera footage, dispatch audio, property logs, impound records, internal messages, and all asset seizure documentation connected to your night patrol unit." Keller stood near the booking counter, suddenly very still. Cole was behind him, pale under the harsh lights. Evan Miles, the young desk officer, stared at the floor as if the tiles had become a witness stand. Hale's voice remained controlled, but his hands betrayed him, one thumb rubbing the side of his phone. "On what basis?" Pierce finally looked up. "On the basis that you detained the federal judge supervising the sealed corruption matter your unit is already named in." No one moved. The sentence did not explode. It landed heavier than that. It lowered itself over the hallway like a steel door. Keller's mouth opened, but nothing useful came out. Hale's eyes went to Naomi, then to the folder, then back to Pierce. "That is not possible." Naomi stepped out of the holding room. Her wrists were unmarked enough for some people to dismiss, marked enough for the cameras to remember. "It became possible at 12:17 a.m., she said. Pierce handed the order to one of the agents. "Secure the server room." Hale took a half-step sideways. "You cannot just enter restricted areas of a municipal police facility." Pierce's expression did not change. "Your department accepted federal funding for this system." Your own compliance agreement gives us access during an active civil rights investigation. Keller looked at Hale then, not with loyalty, but with the wounded panic of a man realizing the shield above him had cracks. The agents moved past them toward the back corridor. A woman from records appeared at a doorway, eyes wide, holding a stack of folders against her chest. "Captain," she whispered, "they are asking for the impound ledgers." Hale turned sharply. "Do not hand over anything without counsel." Naomi's voice cut in, low and clear. "Counsel can meet us after the evidence is preserved." The records woman looked from Hale to Naomi. Then she looked at Pierce's federal badge. Slowly, she stepped aside. That was the first real collapse. Not arrests, not headlines, just one tired employee choosing the law over fear. Keller saw it too. His face tightened. "This is insane. She was on a bike at midnight. We did not know who she was." Naomi turned to him. "That is the point, Officer Keller. You should not have needed to know who I was to treat me lawfully." The hallway fell quiet again. Even the phones seemed to wait. From the server room down the hall came the sound of a door opening, then an agent's voice calling out, "We have deleted files in the recovery queue." Pierce looked at Hale. "Deleted tonight?" A second voice answered from farther inside. "And last month? In March? Same badge numbers." Cole lowered his head. Keller took one step back from the counter. Hale did not move at all, but the color had drained from his face. Naomi looked past them toward the evidence bin where her cracked helmet sat under fluorescent light. Her father's voice came back to her, steady as a wrench turning in an old garage. "A machine tells the truth if you listen long enough." Tonight, the machine was finally speaking. The recovery queue did not open like a confession. It opened like a map. One file led to another, one badge number to another, one edited minute to a night months before when someone else had sat in a room just like Naomi's and been told that signing was easier than fighting. Agent Pierce stood behind the technician as the screen filled with timestamps, missing segments, overwritten labels, and impound references that matched names Naomi had read in sealed filings. Marcus Reed appeared first, then Denise Walker, then Jerome Ellis, then 20 more. Each name was small on the monitor, just letters and numbers, but Naomi felt the weight of each one settle into the hallway. These were not incidents anymore. They were people returning to the record. Hale stood by the wall with his arms folded, trying to look offended instead of afraid. Keller kept glancing toward the exit, though no one had blocked it. Cole had stopped speaking altogether. Evan Miles, the young desk officer, stood near the record's doorway, pale but steady, holding a thin stack of forms. "Agent Pierce," he said, voice barely above the hum of the lights. Hale turned on him. "Miles, not a word." Evan swallowed. His eyes moved to Naomi's wrists, then to the cracked helmet in the evidence bin, then to the gold edge of her credential on the counter. "I made copies," he said. The hallway went completely still. Pierce looked at him. "Copies of what?" Evan stepped forward and placed the forms on the counter as if laying down something fragile. "Tow releases, cash property sheets, complaint closures. I thought something was wrong, but I did not know who to tell." Hale's face hardened. "You are making a career-ending mistake." Naomi looked at Evan, and her voice softened without losing strength. "No, he is ending the part of his career that required him to look away." Evan's jaw trembled once, then steadied. That was when Keller finally spoke, too fast, too loud for the quiet room. "Captain told us what to do with the stops. He said the bikes and cars were part of a task force fund. We were following orders." Hale looked at him as if betrayal had a sound. Pierce turned slightly. "Keep talking." Keller stopped, realizing too late that fear had opened his mouth wider than loyalty ever had. Cole looked at the floor. The technician called from the server room. "We found the off-site folder." Pierce stepped inside and came back with his expression colder than before. "Asset photos, payment spreadsheets, private messages." Naomi closed her eyes for half a second. Not relief, not victory, just the confirmation of something ugly finally dragged under light. Hale reached for his phone, but an agent stepped in front of him. "Captain, preserve that device." Hale stared at Naomi then, all polish gone. "You do not know what you are tearing down." Naomi looked around the station at the tired walls, the cameras, the people who had learned to whisper near power. "I know exactly what I'm tearing down," she said. A system that mistook fear for permission. Outside, through the front windows, dawn had not arrived yet, but the rain was thinning. The first news van had not come. The public did not know. The city still slept, and that made the moment feel even larger because justice was not performing yet. It was working quietly, name by name, file by file. Pierce instructed the agents to separate the officers, secure the phones, and contact the United States Attorney. No one shouted. No one needed to. The collapse had become procedural, and procedure was more frightening to guilty men than anger. Naomi walked to the evidence bin and lifted her helmet with both hands. The cracked visor reflected Keller in one splintered line, Hale in another, and her own face in the center, calm and tired and unbroken. Evan Miles approached slowly. "Judge Brooks," he said, "I should have spoken sooner." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said. The answer was honest enough to hurt. Then she added, "But you are speaking now. Make it count." His eyes filled, but he nodded. At the far end of the hall, Keller sat down hard on a bench, not because anyone forced him, but because the truth had finally taken the weight out of his legs. Hale remained standing, staring at the server room as if the building itself had betrayed him. Naomi turned toward the window. Somewhere 10 miles away, beneath a gas station canopy, Lena Ortiz still had the first video on her phone. Somewhere across the county, Marcus Reed was asleep beside an eviction notice that might no longer decide his future. And inside the station, the ring that had survived on silence began to fall apart without a single raised voice. By 4:38 a.m., the rain had stopped. The station parking lot shone under the floodlights like black glass, reflecting federal vehicles, wet tree branches, and the quiet movement of agents carrying boxes through the side entrance Captain Hale had once used to hide people from the public desk. Naomi Brooks stood near the front window with her cracked helmet in one hand and her gloves in the other, watching the building change shape around her. It was the same beige hallway, the same tired lights, the same counters and cameras, but fear had moved to the other side of the room. Keller sat alone near the interview doors, his shoulders bent forward, his eyes fixed on nothing. Cole was in a separate office with an agent and a recorder. Hale stood beside the booking counter while Pierce read him the preservation notice again. Every word clean, every word final. No shouting, no spectacle, just law returning to a place that had learned to live without it. Evan Miles came out of records carrying another box of copied logs, and behind him, 2 clerks followed with folders they had kept hidden in bottom drawers, personal lockers, old file cabinets, places where conscience had tried to survive without being seen. Naomi watched them place the files on the counter one by one. The names grew into a stack. Marcus Reed, Denise Walker, Jerome Ellis, Angela Price, Terrence Boyd. People who had been reduced to case numbers were becoming whole again through paper, timestamps, and courage arriving late, but not too late. Agent Pierce stepped beside Naomi and lowered his voice. "The United States Attorney is awake. Warrants are being prepared. Internal Affairs is on notice. By noon, this will not be containable." Naomi nodded, but her eyes stayed on the window. It never should have been contained. Pierce accepted that without defense. Beyond the glass, the first thin line of dawn appeared over the road, pale blue behind the rooftops. 10 miles away, Lena Ortiz had already sent her video to federal investigators. The gas station footage showed the stop from the beginning. Keller's words, the wallet, the credential flashing beneath the light, the helmet handled carelessly, Naomi turning her face toward the camera instead of turning away. It would matter, not because she was a judge, but because it proved what had happened when they thought she was nobody. A desk phone rang, and Evan answered it. His face changed as he listened. "Judge Brooks," he said quietly, holding the receiver out. Naomi crossed the room. "This is Naomi Brooks." On the other end, a man's voice trembled. "My name is Marcus Reed. Agent Pierce told me I could call this number." "Ma'am, is it true they found my file?" Naomi looked down at the stack of folders. His name was near the top. The ink looked ordinary. The weight did not. "Yes, Mr. Reed," she said. "They found it. For a moment, there was only breathing on the line. Then Marcus whispered, "I thought nobody believed me." Naomi closed her eyes briefly. "Someone should have believed you the first time." He did not answer, but the silence that followed was not empty. It was the sound of a person setting down a burden he had carried too long. When the call ended, Naomi placed the receiver back gently. Keller was looking at her now, not with arrogance, not even with hatred, with the stunned confusion of a man who had mistaken a badge for character and was beginning to understand the difference too late. He opened his mouth as if to apologize, but Naomi did not wait for the words. Some apologies arrived only after consequences became unavoidable, and she had no need to collect them. Outside, a tow truck pulled into the lot, not to seize another car, but to return one. An evidence team had brought her sport bike from the gas station, careful now, respectful now, as if the machine itself had become a witness. The black and blue frame gleamed beneath the morning light, rainwater beating along the tank. Naomi stepped outside. The air smelled of wet asphalt, diesel, and the clean edge of dawn. She set the cracked helmet on the seat and rested one palm on the warm metal. For a second, she saw her father's garage in Detroit, his hands guiding hers over an engine, his voice telling her that power was never in the noise, but in what kept running after the noise stopped. Behind her, the station doors opened and closed as agents moved through them. Inside, Hill's command had ended. Keller's certainty had ended. A ring built on silence had ended before the city finished waking up. Naomi pulled on her gloves. Her wrists still held faint marks, thin shadows beneath her skin, but her hands were steady. She looked once at the building, then at the road stretching east toward the federal courthouse. No speech, no raised fist, no victory smile for cameras that had not arrived yet. She lowered the cracked visor, started the engine, and let the sport bike breathe beneath her like thunder held under control. Then Judge Naomi Brooks rode into the morning, leaving behind a station full of evidence, a county full of reopened files, and a silence so deep it sounded almost like justice.